Welcome everybody to our first in our Motzei Shabbos Sidra. Excuse me. Thank you for coming on. It's going to take a couple of times I can see to get everybody on, but that's what we'll have to do. What we have to do. So I mentioned that there are a couple of videos that they are sponsored by Ken Wine. So they're more or less puff pieces for Ken Wine, but they have some valuable information. Rabbi is going to be in charge of zooming them, speed zooming them ahead in case they turn out not to be, because I didn't get a chance to look at all of them.
They're pretty much just about the battling process.
I understand that, okay.
With the matzah, that was very important because that's half the process.
Right, let's see it. And so they're not long. They only take one is the first one, I think, is 9 minutes. So we can take a look at it. And if it turns out that there's too much puff pieces for Ken and Wine, then we'll just fast forward ahead. Or whatever. It's 2 parts. So we'll see if, as Shlomo was right, that it's only about the bottling process. The bottling process also contains some valuable information, because our questions that we had, which is the pasteurization, the flash pasteurization, the bishul, the sulfites, takes place at the bottling level. I doubt they go into such a lot.
No, it's all that's pre-bottling.
Okay. All that's pre-bottling?
Yeah.
Okay.
What goes into the bottle is a finished product.
I see. Okay, let's see what it is, and if it doesn't turn out to be educationally valuable for us, we will we'll just we'll go back to good old learning Torah. Go ahead, Mordechai.
Hi, and welcome to a brand new Was ist Neues VNR video news release. I'm sure most of you are wondering where I am, what all these bottles of wine and grape juice are. I'm sure you recognize most of these names: Kedem, Baron Herzog, Carmen. Most of you are familiar with this kind of bottle. Kedem grape juice, dark, gold, there's even a blush. Be it if you're Heimish, be it if you're Yeshivish, Hasidish, even if you're Jewish or you're not Jewish, people seem to like this product. We are today in Kedem's factory in Bayonne, New Jersey, and we are going to go see exactly how this product is made. With us right now is James Buxbaum from Kedem. Shalom Aleichem.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So about this product, how exactly is this product made? Because I know this factory only does the bottling part.
What's wonderful about Kedem grape juice, it's the only grape juice, first of all, Kedem is the second largest grape juice selling in America, only after Welch's, which is not kosher, of course. And Kedem grape juice is made from 100% Concord grape juice, grown in upstate New York. It's simply crushed grape juice and then just processed in a way to make it as natural as possible and to keep it stable on the shelf. That's how it's made. It's crushed upstate in our winery in Marlboro, New York, and then it is shipped down here in tanker trucks. And a little bit later on, we'll show you how the grape juice is bottled.
That's great. Now, I was asking you before exactly how old Kedem was, and I couldn't get over the dates that you were giving me.
In Czechoslovakia, Kedem was started as a winery, and that's how the name Baron Herzog came about, because it was such a good winery that the local prince named the Herzog family as their supplier of good wines. And of course, for themselves, they made kosher wines. But that's when it was started, 1848 in Czechoslovakia. In 1948, when Mr. Herzog Sr. came to this country, Alav Shalom, he started a small winery on the Lower East Side, eventually moved to the Bronx, eventually moved to Williamsburg, and here we are today in Bayonne, New Jersey.
And you told me you're here about 9 years now.
That's correct.
Now, before we just go there, how big exactly is the bottling plant?
Oh, wait till you see it. That's all I can tell you. We have, I think, 7 lines, one of which is completely hands-off, and all that happens is that people watch it so that we make sure that the product that goes through is correct. Each and every bottle is correctly made, but you'll see it when we get there.
And grape juices, you have, well, I would say 3 or 4 different kinds here, right?
Oh, there's quite a few different kinds. In fact, if you take a look, we have white grape juice, of course red grape juice, there's even palm grape juice, which is a combination of pomegranate and juice and grape juice, and even an entire line of sparkling grape juices.
And the gold.
And the gold.
Oh, the peach.
And peach
Yeah.
flavored.
Wow.
So there's quite a number of grape juices, but of course, the mainstay is always the regular Kedem 100% Concord grape juice.
Okay, well, let's go see the factory.
Well, that's for the grape juice. We also, in this factory, are also bottling all the Kedem wines. And this is really wonderful because some of these wines are made, perfectly for those people who like light wines for their Seder, and even richer and heavier and memorable wines from their youth. So those are the wines and grape juices that are made here.
Wait, these wines are bottled in the factory here, not upstate?
That's correct.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Well, you'll find out in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Jay.
You're
We'll
welcome.
see you a little later.
See you a little bit later.
Thanks.
We're fortunate enough to have with us today Eli Herzog, who's the 8th generation of Herzogs in the wine business for the Kedem family of wines. And Eli's going to tell us a little bit about how the process works. So Eli, please.
Product comes down in our tankers from Marlborough, and it goes into a designated tank where it's been filtered, and from there it goes into one of the storage tanks, and from there it goes straight into the bottle. Now we'll see the tanker where it comes into. This is the tanker that comes in from Marlborough and that goes directly into the filter.
Ellie, how many gallons is in the tank?
5,700.
Well, how many bottles does that make? Pipe. Jay, what do you say? How many bottles does that make?
There's approximately 2.5 gallons per case. So if there's 5,700, you're looking at probably 1,000 cases.
These are the storage tanks. From these tanks it goes into the lab where it's tested and make sure it's ready to be bottled.
What you're looking at here are flats of plastic bottles, empty plastic bottles that come in completely sterile, that are then loaded onto our machines and then eventually go onto the flats where, as you can see, the bottles are moving along the assembly line into the bottling room. In just a moment, we'll take you all into the bottling room where you'll see this grape juice being bottled so that it can be sent all over the world. This is the 32-ounce Kedem grape juice bottle. As you can see, these are where the bottles end up coming in. Even though they come in sterile, every single bottle is washed and sterilized once again before the grape juice is bottled back down there on the round, what looks like a merry-go-round, where the bottles are filled with the final Kedem grape juice. It then goes down the line. It is then capped and eventually goes through a tunnel where it is then once again sterilized with heat so that it is shelf stable when you get it to your home and you can chill it and then enjoy it. As you can see, it's a completely closed system. No hands ever touched it. And as a result, we have a really perfect product. At this point, there is still some, as you can see, a little bit of red juice because they fill it so totally full. It then goes into this tunnel where every single bottle is washed. And so when you end up getting it at home, it ends up being completely clean and perfect to use. The plant at this point of the bottling, here's where it's next to the final part of the bottling, where once again there is very strong, kind of like going through a car wash. There's a very strong wind that comes out of those black areas that completely rinses and dries the bottle, where eventually it will get labeled and put into boxes, again automatically, to be sent out to the various stores throughout the nation and the world. Here's a state-of-the-art label machine that ends up putting the labels on each individual bottle, and it's a two-step process. The first one that you're looking at now is the front label, and if you pan to your right, you'll see the second one, which is putting on the back label, and this back label has all federal and state and local requirements of exactly what the ingredients are in each and every bottle. Here's the final product coming out after it is cleaned, packaged, and sealed, and ready to go into its boxes. As you can see, until this point, no one and no human hand has actually touched any of the bottles. And so this is all part of an effort to make sure that every single drop that you get is completely pure. Okay, now it's a little bit loud in here because we're bottling, we're at the end of the bottling line. And at this point, if you hand your camera to the right, you will notice that once again, even this is completely and fully and totally automated. Grape juice is dropped into already cases that are lined up to have it. It's kind of like at a bowling alley, if you will. And here you go. Take a look at that. You see every box is sealed automatically behind glass, so that again, nobody touches it. It's still open, the box, but here again, nobody touches it, and it goes through a sealing machine where both, you want to bend down a little bit, I don't know, you can see it better than I can. So all the boxes are folded. Keep walking. And here's the taping machine, where the red tape acts as yet another seal to make sure that it's perfect when it gets to you in the store and eventually into your refrigerator or onto your shelf at home. Okay, we're reaching the end of the process. Here, every individual case is loaded onto an area, you pan to your left, where it is stacked and put together in rows, what we call flats, which eventually will go onto a pallet, if you can look at the pallet down there.
Okay, nothing we learned in this video. This is part one. It goes over to part two. Mordechai? Anybody? Okay.
Yeah, I have to get the part.
I don't know. I'm asking you first whether you want to even show them this, because we didn't learn anything from this one.
No,
So,
and I'm not sure there's going to be any additional information in part two.
No,
okay.
there's not.
No, there's not. Okay, so this is not what we were looking for. I'm sure, because the reason we found this is because we just Googled Kedem. I assume if we Google, maybe, I don't know, maybe if we Googled kosher wine making or kosher grape juice making, maybe we'd get something else. I don't know. Let's try it. But I'm not trying to force the issue here because kosher grape juice. What's that? Manufacturing?
Production.
That's got to be an old video that we just watched because it said Kedem was the only kosher one. Welch's isn't kosher, and I think Welch's is now under the OU.
It's been on the OU for a long, long time.
Right.
There's that can't be.
That video is dated 2010.
Oh, okay. Here's one. Kosher in the Valley Rabbis keep production over Jewish grape juice production, but that's a Goyish video. Certification of the beverage industry. This is an OU one. Let's see. Videos. Hold on. Ask OU. Okay, so there's one here. I don't know if it's a video. The one which is Mordechai, the production of kosher wine and grape juice, OU Torah, some guy named Nachum Rabinowitz. You have any idea who he is? He's your cousin, no?
I think we both know him.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, my daughter is Nachum Rabinowitz's executive assistant, And the two of them together run all wine production in the whole world, kosher wine production in the whole world, literally. The OU, I think, certifies every single wine in the entire world. Anyway, so I don't know if this is a video of my thing. It came up as a video. It's called The Production of Kosher. It's OU Torah. So it could be that we saw this in Eretz Yisrael. Is that possible? Is this possible in the kashrus Yarchikalis?
Yes, very possible that this was a part of the presentation when we did Yayin Nesach.
Right, let's see.
Baruchim Aboim b'Shem Hashem, b'Shus the Asher Shlita, who is a big shutef in this and many other Harry HBrachos.
Okay, let's try this one, Mordechai, just for a few moments. It's called The Production of Kosher Wine and Grape Juice. And it's an OU production. Does it come up?
I'm doing the search.
And ask you kasher shiurim. Just to give you an example of which may be of interest, the OU right now, we are in the middle of giving, I think it will be a total of 7 Skype shiurim to the Beis HaTalmud Kollel in Melbourne, Australia. We already did 3. Amicham has projected another 4. And our first speaker this afternoon just spoke at the Kollel of Greater Boston. So just to give you an example, besides Lakewood, many of the Kollel that came from Beis Medrash Kavoya, the OU has a relationship with them. It's a great covet for me to introduce our first speaker, Rabbi Shlita, who besides being a Mara Asra in Flatbush of a shul, he's also the senior rabbinic coordinator and wine expert at the OU, and he will speak about the production of kosher wine and grape juice. Rabbi Nachum.
Okay, I have it.
It's dated because Nachum looks a lot younger than he does now, but okay. Let's put it on.
Okay, so give me a minute to get it on.
Yeah, it's not, obviously not the one that he said. It's not the Aguda one, but it could be has the same information. Let's just take a little tour through it. There you go. Who is that? You recognize him?
Asher Shlita, who is a big shutef in
I was just mentioning to Rav Moshe Elephant that there's a production going on right now in Argentina. There's a company called, I don't know if you've heard of it, Honest Tea, which make organic tea products, sweetened some of them with grape juice. And that's a Coca-Cola owned company, and they're kosher. So we have now 13 individuals who are involved in a grape crush in Argentina because this is the season in the Southern Hemisphere for making grape juice. And we're involved with that. It's going to stop this week, and then it will continue after Pesach, Emretz Hashem. So I'd like to just share with you a little bit of, on a practical level, what goes on to making grape juice, making wine kosher. People make all kinds of assumptions about what does the OU do. How is it possible that the OU certifies Betty Crocker fruit roll-ups which have grape juice? What are you relying on? What kind of kula? All kinds of questions that come up. And so we'll talk about not so much the kulas, but I'm not aware of any particular kulas, but I'll try to explain what is involved with the process. So we're starting here talking about Pri Hagafen, or reviewing halacha and technical issues of wine and grape juice. What's the makar for yayin nesach, or stam yenam, as we know it? So there's a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, Elik Varm Shel Avdei Kachavim. These are the things, the objects of Avdei Kachavim, asurin, that they are aser. V'isurin iser hana, not just aser v'achil or shtia, but they're aser to benefit from. And the first is hayayin, is wine. And then it continues, Achaymet Shel Avdei Kachavim Shemitchilasa yayin, talks about vinegar. Vinegar stems from alcohol, and in the case, I guess the most popular type of alcohol at the time was yayin. So if you have vinegar which was derived from a non-Jew's wine, so that also is an Isser, and it's an Isser Hana. Now, the Gemara goes on and asks an interesting question. Yayin Meinalan. Where do we derive, from what pasuk do we derive this halacha? Now, this halacha is really, as we'll see, it's in a Siddur Rabbanan today. Bizman hazeh, it's not as if we're saying it's yain of avodah zarah, that they actually used as takroivus of avodah zarah. They used it in the worship of avodah zarah. We're talking about something which is stam yainam, which is just what a guy handled, what a guy used, or what it belongs to a guy. And the Gemara goes and derives it from a pasuk, that they will eat from the fats of their sacrifices. Yishtu yain nesicham.
Mordechai, I give you full whatever to scroll ahead.
Nesicham, that they use this word of libation,
starting here. I don't know what
to
we're
worship
going to
their avodah, just as we have the.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said I give you full whatever to scroll ahead because he's obviously starting with the sugya and yain nesach, which certainly can Chazara, but we already learned. So I don't know. You want to go ahead a few minutes to see if he's into the production? That's what we're interested.
Okay, let's see.
Alpha Avdalos, Israel, and they cause them to serve avodah zarah. So it's not as if these are two. This is something which is very, very serious. Even after you convert much of the separates it from the grape pulp. As the Shulchan Aruch describes it, at what point do we say that this is called wine? So that if a guy were to come into contact with it, he would aser it. It's now considered stam yainam or yain nesach bizman chazal. That's mishihischel limoshech. That's when the wine begins to flow. When it starts to flow in a press. Because the press is an incline. And here's a picture. This is from excavations in Eretz Yisrael. This is what a wine press used to look like. Essentially, it's a large pit and a lower pit, and there's a small canal which connects the two. What they did was they dumped the grapes into the upper pit, and they pressed on them to let the juice start flowing, and then the canal, through gravity, used to run down into this. That was the separation. This is basically the winemaking process of old. Yes, the fermentation was done perhaps in jugs after that, but this is basically the winery. Are those two pits? That's what it used to look like, and that's what you see Chazal describing. Basically, two pits. When you update that a little bit, you have a stone which is on top, and there was a stone on top of it which they used to grind the grapes with, and then you can see that there was a lower bucket, sort of fashioned out of stone, where the wine would drip down from the upper stone into the lower stone. Same idea, same concept. And this is more contemporary. This is probably a press of about 50 years ago, although you see them still around. This is a sort of a large basket, and on top there's a large round head which comes down and presses the grapes. And because it's a basket.
So we're not seeing the pictures that he's talking about.
We're not seeing the pictures, right? Okay.
Basket with holes, the liquid can pour out from the sides and will be collected underneath. Here, I want to describe for you and show you why it is that we in Chutz La'aretz are not interested in what goes on in the field. Now, today, not all grapes, although the better grapes, if you go to France and Bordeaux, they're usually picking grapes by hand. And that happens by finer wines. There's a lot of the whole, the way they grow them and the way they baby them and cultivate them is a whole art in itself. But also, when they pick them, they're very careful. They select them very carefully. They handle them, mamish, like halavai, we would treat our children the way they treat these grapes. That's what happens in the field. But industrial type of grape juice, they're not interested. And maybe in Argentina, where the labor is cheap, they'll use hand labor. But in America, they have machines that do the picking. So this is what a machine that's doing picking looks like. And, well... The sound might work, but the video's not working.
You want to continue with this?
I don't know. How long is this? What's he showing? He's showing a bunch of Argentinians picking grapes, I guess, right?
No, the machine does it.
The machines.
How long can this be? Let it go. I guess it's another few seconds, right? So. Lucky Shabbos with the list of music.
Okay, so basically what you saw here, and maybe some of you were maybe in shock because you saw pouring of liquid. What happened there was the harvester picked the grapes out of the vines, and it loaded them up into the machine, and then it dumped them all out. And yes, when you dump and you have large amounts of grapes or large trucks of grapes, what you have is the weight of the grapes and the handling of the grapes is going to cause some juice to come out. But what happens here, as you see in this bin, is you have grapes sitting in liquid, and maybe temporarily for a second as it's pouring out, there was a separation, but immediately came back together. And the poskim say that unless it's coming to a permanent separation, that's not hamshacha. Hamshacha means that you separate the juice from the grape completely, and so that it no longer joins. In this case, it never really separated. It's sitting in a pool of juice. So the fact is that even in these types of machines, our experience is that there's no real separation that takes place that we would consider to be hamshacha. And the reality is that when you get the grapes in, you can see based on how they're coming in, you can see if there was a hamshacha or there wasn't a hamshacha. Therefore, we don't even bother going out in the fields because we don't feel it's necessary. You can see if there was separated. There are, for example, some trucks that have screens at the bottom, and they actually collect the juice underneath. And that is a problem, because whenever you have juice which separates and is maintained, it's kept, that's a problem. If you have juice that separates and just falls out and under the truck and is just wasted, that's not hamshacha for kiyum, and that's also not a problem. So it's really only when you're separating to keep that juice that you have an issue of hamshacha. Okay, so when you receive the grapes, and I think this is one of the questions that I think we received, was what is necessary in terms of the dumping of the grapes into the bin. So the Shulchan Aruch says that he brings them into these large vessels, he throws them into the press, where there is wine which already is being pressed. Mutter b'diavad, that's mutter, but he says when? B'diavad. That means what? A goy, if he were to have thrown in the grapes into the press, that would be b'diavad mutter. That's not lechatchila mutter. So the question is, who does the throwing of the grapes? The reality is that we try to have Yisrael, have our Shomer Shabbos workers do the throwing. And here's a picture from Argentina. And if you come this time of year to Argentina, sometimes in Mendoza, which is the grape growing area, you have temperatures of about 105 degrees. Now, not always our mashgichim and our workers are not people who are, blue-collar laborers. Sometimes they're more accustomed to being the base medrash than they are to being in working in 105-degree heat. Now, when you have a button you can press and a truck dumps out the grapes, that's not so bad. It's that they can manage to press a button. But in this case, this truck did not have a lift, and it was necessary to shovel out the grapes from the truck into the bin. And it's standing out in the heat for hours doing that is something. What we do in this case is we have the guy move the grapes from the back of the truck to the front of the truck, which is much of the work, but then the Yisrael does the last piece just to push it into the... Now, then the real question is, and the reality is, I don't know that a bin, as you see it here, is considered a gas, and we'll look into that a little bit further. Here's what the inside of a bin looks like in one particular place. You throw all the grapes in, and then this screw pushes the grapes onto the next process. Now, looking at this, why is this a gas? You just threw in grapes, and those grapes are going to move on. But if you take a closer look over here, you'll notice that underneath this screw, there's a screen. Those little holes are a screen. And what's happening is because of the weight of the grapes, you have juice which is actually flowing down. That is a hamshacha. So in this case, again, I don't know if it's called a gas and the gzeira applies, but here we certainly have to be machmer because hamshacha is taking place in this type of but again, this is not necessarily common. It happens occasionally. We're especially careful in this case, but where there is no hamshacha, l'chayra, it's not necessary for the mashgichim to do it, but we nonetheless, we're mahadir to have the mashgichim doing that work as well. when you have, in many places, as we saw in the earlier video, you have a forklift. Our workers are not necessarily trained to drive forklifts and certainly not insured and licensed to do that. So this is an example of where the guy drives the forklift, but the actual dumping is done by the Yisrael. Here's a small video. I guess the sound is also out, but it's fine. We don't need it. What you see is the mashgiach is standing, and he is operating the lever next to the guy. And he's dumping the grapes into this bin, and that's what we try to do in all cases.
Pushing on the gas, but the mashgiach is operating the lever.
I'm going to get this screen afterwards.
Okay. Once the product, for all the steps from here out, once Hamshacha takes place, everything has to be done on Yidei Yisrael. As we'll see, Maga Akum certainly will answer. Even Koicha Shel Akum, if as we'll see, we'll describe exactly what that is, would, it puts into question the whole product. And, from here out, every step, every last movement of the product is all done by Shomer Shabbos Yidden. Now, once the product is in a sealed vessel, such as the Shulchan Aruch describes, if he's carrying like one of these vessels that they would carry wine in, even he's holding the mouth of the vessel, whether it was completely full or not, mutter, so that wine is permitted. He says just to carry a vessel of wine is not an issue, because that's not nisuch. The Shach explains he's holding pianoid, hainushu sasum, that it's sealed. Once you have a vessel which is sealed, so the fact that the guy, if you have wine and you go to a wine store and there's a guy who's stocking the shelves, that's not an issue, because those are closed vessels. Here, when the mashgiach leaves, you're going to see every single inlet, outlet to a tank is going to be sealed with tape and a signature of the mashgiach. Here are hoses. You'll notice that at each hose there are seals, because whenever the mashgiach goes away from a vessel, it always has to be sealed up. This is what a closer look at a seal with a signature of a mashgiach on it. And of course, if you have something like a barrel such as this, you'll notice also we have tape and we have signatures of the mashgiach on it, and of course a closed bottle has its chasimus on it as well. Maga. What is considered maga? Maga means that the guy actually comes into physical contact with the wine. Now that's, as in the red, she'iga b'yadai or b'raglai. He touches the wine, whether with his hand, whether with his feet. Others, the Rambam mentions, say that b'raglai is not considered nisuch, or if he's using something else. We hold, we're machmer, that any way that he touches it, whether he touches it directly with his hand, or whether by extension, if he holds something, which then, if he, let's say they have these mixing vessels or spoons, or he's adding something to it, anytime he comes into contact, that almost invariably will aser the wine completely. That's maga. There's something called koichai, which is a little bit less. That's, for example, if someone opens or closes a valve. That means the valve would move the product from tank A through a hose, through a pump, to the next tank. So that's koicha. That means his force is causing the wine to move. If, for example, if a guy were to take a bottle and to pour it, that's koicha, because once again, he's not physically touching it, but he's causing the movement of the wine. So not if wine comes out because he's holding it, because he's moving it, even if he doesn't splash it, we still say that it's aser. That's what the Shulchan Aruch describes as koichai. And he says, interesting, there's a special chumrah. Stam yenim has its kulas, but it has a special chumrah also that's called nitzuk. Nitzuk means that if you pour, or if, let's say, for example, you have a cup, and this is, you have tastings, wine tastings. And if the wine tastings are taking place with non-mevoshel wine, so what happens is you have a Shomer Shabbos person who stands, he holds the bottle, but you have to make sure that you don't pour it into a cup which was used by a non-Shomer Shabbos or by a goy. Because if you merely pour it into his cup, what he's holding is already aser. So nitzuk means that we sort of take the isser backwards through the flow that's coming from the bottle. It goes back from his cup back into the bottle. The whole bottle that he's pouring from becomes aser. So it's a special chumrah that we have by nitzuk. Now we'll talk a little bit about yain mavushal. So yain mavushal, we know that if a guy is misnasech yain, so then of course it's takrovis of a which is aser. That's real yain nesach. However, the Shulchan Aruch says, or the Rambam says it. He says, "Shuroi lahakev al gabe mizbech." The only type that we say is aser is that type of a wine that's fitting to be used on the mizbech. When Chazal made their gzeira, which was closely associated with the iser of yain nesach, and both iser and iser hanoya, lagazru el yain haroyis nisnasech, only things which are roy. In those days, if you have yain which was cooked, so then you would be able to drink together with the guy even from one cup, because it's considered eina roy lemizbech. Interestingly, the Shulchan Aruch just defines what is mavushal, mishir siach agabe eish, once it came to be cooked on a fire. And we'll see how we define that today with modern cooking. Interesting that the Rosh asks a kasha. The Rosh asks, he says, Davar Tamua. I understand, why are you comparing yain nesach with stam yainam? So if they're saying that the isser of drinking wine is because the social context that's created when you drink together with a goya, that brings the chasnas. So if that's the case, so the fact that this is yain mavushal, so therefore what? You're not going to marry the person? Well, why does that change anything? That's the Rosh's kasha. So the Rosh actually says something after, which we'll see may have relevance in the last sentence. Since yain mavushal is something which is not shchiach, so maybe you're right. The reason, the rationale that's used for yain nesach doesn't apply over here. But nonetheless, since it's lo shchiach, who makes yain mavushal? So therefore, legazr bei. I mean, the reality is that it's possible, like for example, when we started, that the gzeira was really, and the psukim actually tied together stam yainam with yain nesach. So pshat is that it's really the same. It comes from the same isser. It comes from the same isser. It's only shaykh to make the isser on the same things that, because it's all avodah zarah and znus is really the same thing together, like the Pirkei Blazer said. If that's the case, then there's no reason to be mavdil between one and the other. That's just a svara. But this is the famous Rosh's kasha. Rav Moshe and his tshuva defines yain mavushal, and he says pashut shu yad soledus. He says that when you define what is mavushal, what temperature do you need to cook it up to? He says you need yad soledus. You need to cook it up until the yad soledus, which we're familiar with from Hilchos Shabbos. And he says afshalei mala resichus, even though it doesn't bubble up like a boiled product. Why the yad soledus b'chshivas bishul chaldinim b'davar lach? When it comes to liquids, you say yad soledus is mavushal. That's the definition of mavushal. Just like Hilchos Shabbos, to be mavashal something is yad soledus. You don't wait until it's boiling. The same is true over here. This is Rav Moshe's position, and he actually mentions a number. He says be'erech kuf ayin hey malis l'chumra. He says it should be 175. Now we all know, when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, we're much more machmer. We're concerned about temperatures of about 120 degrees, 118 degrees. Famously, the Shmir Shabbos Kolchasa talks about not less than 45 degrees Celsius, which is about 116 degrees Fahrenheit. It's interesting where Reb Shlomo Zalman got that number from. I understand that when he was in Gaman, he used to sit with Rav Bengus, who was the Rav Dei Dachredis in Yerushalayim, and Dr. Wallach, who was famously the founder of Shaare Tzedek Hospital, came, and he was discussing a shaila with Rav Bengus, and he asked about, they had a refes boker, they had cows by the hospital which provided milk for the patients in the hospital. And he had a Hilchos Shabbos question because one of the cows was sick. So as they're sitting there, Shlomo Zalman asks him, he's always a very curious person, always interested, he said, how do you know that the cow is sick? So Dr. Wallach said, because it has a fever. He says, what's the normal temperature of a cow that you know that it has fever? So Dr. Wallach said the cow is similar to human temperature, so I guess 98.6. And if it's higher than that, you know that the animal is sick. So Shlomo Zalman immediately asked him a question. He says, I want to know, amongst all animals or birds that you shecht, He says, what is the hottest temperature of such an animal? So they came out, there was I think it was a duck or a goose, was the hottest temperature. And what is the normal body temperature of a goose? I think it was 45 degrees centigrade. So Shlomo Zalman said, since the Gemara in Chulin says that the sak and shchita is not aser because of blias, so it must be that the blood coming out of a goose, as it's shechted, cannot be yatzeledis. So he says, I don't know what the temperature is, but it's certainly not 45 degrees. It has to be higher than that. So that's why the Shemir Shabbos Kol Chasa came out with the 45 degree number. But again, the reality is it's a range. And the truth is it's different for every person. It's different for every type of product. Davar lach is different than davar yavesh when it comes to yatzeledis. So it's a range, let's say from 118 through, let's say, Reb Moshe is 175 degrees. But when you want to prepare wine that's considered mavushal choladeis, obviously you have to take the higher range. When it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, you want to be machmer for the lowest end of the range. So that's just how this psak comes out. There's a tshuva which is quoted from Yashiv, and what he says over here is something interesting. He says, he says, if it's true that most wine is pasteurized, I don't know who gave him this information, honestly. I mean, it's not true. Most wine in the world is not mavoshel. Many kosher wines are mavoshel, but you will not find any non-kosher wine kemat. Maybe there's some strange exception, but you'll never find wine typically that's not kosher, that's mavoshel. The only reason to be mavoshel wine preserves itself because of the alcohol. So the only reason to pasteurize product like milk or juice is because it spoils. Wine doesn't need that. So the only reason to do it would be because you want to create a situation where it's yain mavoshel. So in any case, that's what he says. He says, if that were the true, he says, if that's the standard practice, why? Because he quotes the Rosh. He says, Milsa de Leishchicha is like Gazru. But he says, if standard wine is mavushal, is pasteurized, he says, who says that that's Milsa de Leishchicha? Again, I don't know. I mean, I guess a hakira you could ask is, are we interested in Jewish wine b'chalal? If the whole reason is mishum chasnas, you're really looking at what's out in the market. You're looking at what's by the goyim, not what's doing by the Eden. The fact that this changes, I guess, I don't know. Again, I'm not here to. I'm just the mitzias that he's quoting. I think is one that one could question. Another question that comes up very frequently is a question of yain mozug. Many people, Rahman al-Atzlan, have illnesses, diabetes and the like, that they have difficulty drinking not just wine, but even grape juice. And if they need to drink for their HBrachos, they can't, maybe during the year they used challah or matzah to make kiddush, but the HBrachos is something that everyone has to take. So what you do is you dilute the wine, or you dilute the grape juice. So what is the shiur for that? So it's famously, the Shulchan Aruch says, the yeinish shalanu, he says that maybe Bisman Chazal, wine was very strong, and it was common practice to be moizik, to dilute it with water. But yain shalonu she'ein chazakim kol kach, he says, the Shulchan Aruch, nowadays we don't have that type of wine, and certainly we don't have that today. He says, afilu ramat tlasa v'yasa arba, even if you have 3/4 of water, ein mavarach ala bar priagafen. So the Shulchan Aruch says you wouldn't make a bar priagafen on that. Now, what does the Shulchan Aruch say is the shiur? So the Pri Megadim, and it seems, I think the Kaf HaChaim say the shiur would be rov. You have to have at least 51% grape in order for this to be considered a din of yain. Whether it's grape juice or whether it's yain, I'm not going to get involved in whether grape juice can be used for HBrachos. There's a discussion in Achrayim about that, whether it has to be meshaker, it doesn't have to be meshaker. But assuming, I think the Kabbalah of most Paiskim is that the grape juice can be used for HBrachos and for yain, for kiddush. But nonetheless, the way that Shulchan Aruch says it, you would need to have rov. Now, lately, I've been getting a lot of questions. I don't know, this is one of the things that comes up every year or two, and it keeps coming back. And a lot of the Sephardish Rabbanim are calling up to find out what is the situation with wine and grape juice, and all kinds of irurim about wine and grape juice. And just the other day, I had a conversation with Rav Faish Herzog, who's one of the principals of Kedem, and he assures me that this is not even close. The standard Kedem grape juice product is 85% straight single strength juice. It has 15% perhaps mixture of concentrate and water, but that's a minority. So even according to the Shulchan Aruch, there should not be any issue. And we'll get a little bit later into discussing what the product they have called light grape juice, which is, if you notice, it doesn't even say grape juice, it says grape juice beverage. That's because of FDA labeling requirements, and we'll describe that as we get into the next slide. But if you look in the Ramah, for Ashkenazim, it's certainly a lot more kal. The Ramah says, as long as you have not less than 1 part wine to 5 parts of water, it's not less than 20%, then you're fine. Because he says that that's enough to be considered yain mazik. Wine is something that the Reb Shlomo Zalman questions whether this applies to grape juice. Could be the whole din of meziga is only din by yain. It doesn't apply to, yes, it's true that yain megita is something which can be used for kiddush grape juice, which is not fermented. But as far as yain mazik, perhaps not. But in terms of wine, the Ashkenazim have it a lot easier in this respect. I think we did this one already. We're going backwards. Okay. There's a question about grape juice concentrate. How do you treat grape juice concentrate? And there's a famous tshuva in the Shlomo from Shlomo Zalman where he says like this. He says, La'achar shenisbashel. If you take the wine, and when you concentrate, what you're doing is you're cooking it up and you're removing the water from the juice. So you're left with a sort of a syrupy, very thick, high sugar juice concentrate. So which is approximately 1/5, which is the volume is now 1/5 of what it was. So he says, he says, you can't drink this. And the Vahishaita Chashvani Shupasul Kiddush. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says, L'chayra, since it's not roy for shtia, it's not, you can't make Kiddush on it. So he says, V'im kain, he questions, Minayin lanu shechayzer lach sheroi ayder safas maim. Who says that the fact that you reconstituted by putting water back into it, who says that that changes it back into wine? This is Rabbi Shlomo Zalman's position. And apparently these Svardish Rabbanim have been calling me, are concerned about it as well. Apparently I think Rav Yosef also says the same, that you cannot consider reconstituted wine to be considered wine. And Mamela, let's talk about the light grape juice from Kedem. Light grape juice from Kedem, while it has a roiv of grape product in it, even though it has aspartame and water added to it, it does have roiv, grape. So there's no issue, but they do have an issue with it. And the reason they would have an issue is because some of that grape to make the roiv is a concentrated grape. And if Rabbi Shlomo Zalman is saying that you're questioning, and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman doesn't say bevadois, but he says he wonders whether it's good. So he says that product, if you can take the water out, and you take the aspartame out, and you take the, aspartame is very tiny, but if you take the grape juice concentrate out, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says maybe that's not considered yain, and you only can consider the single strength juice as the wine, so then l'chayra, that when you have less than 50%. So for Sfardim, that might be an issue. Again, for someone who's a chayla, ask your Rav what to do. Belsky, in a Masar magazine, that's the OU's Torah magazine that they put out, brought a raya from a Taisvis, not like Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, and the Taisvis talks about when you have wine which is yavish, dried out wine, and it's about the Isser of Haitzah, carrying it out on Shabbos. So it says if you have a kazayas of yain yavish, that's considered chashuv. So Taisvis says, why? Because he says, because wine, the shear of Haitzah would be a revius. When you dry out the revius, you end up with a kazayas of yain yavish. And it says, "L'chein kazayis yain yesh b'shir chashuv leitzah ha'il v'yesh b'yodid la'arv b'mayim lachzir l'revius." Taisus say clearly, why? Because you can reconstitute it. So Taisus is saying that it's considered wine. And he says then, "V'roy oz l'kaishal bracha." And Taisus says beferish these words, then you can use it for kaishal bracha. You can use it. So he's bringing a raya from Taisus that he would consider it, even certainly if he's considering something like a dry wine, and reconstituted to be yain, certainly a concentrated wine, which is still in a liquid form, should be considered like wine. Just to as an appreciation to those who are moisei nefesh, not just in this, but certainly in this, to do kashrus, when, getting from the grapes which are in the vineyard and moving it into a bottle, and the cup that we drink and make kiddush and do all the mitzvahs with, the bris milah and the HBrachos and so on, brichas hamazon, that requires Mesiras Nefesh on the part. For some reason, the HBrachos made it that the grape season always falls out Yantiv time. In southern hemisphere, it's Pesach, and in the northern hemisphere, it always falls out Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and you have, in every place that we're making kosher grape juice or kosher wine, you have not just one, but a team of people who are spending sometimes Shabbosos and sometimes even Yom Tovim away from their families. The OU is giving hashgacha and wine in basically every wine region in Eretz Yisrael. Of course, in New York State, we're giving in, interestingly, in Virginia. We recently were doing wine in Virginia. We're doing, of course, in California. We're doing it in Oregon, and we're doing it in Washington State. We're doing it in France and in Spain and in Italy, and where else?
Okay, that advertisement. I would have curious to hear Taka where the whole list, but I think he was finished. So Rabbi say, there you go. The last 15 or 20 minutes were exactly on our point, which is the difference between grape juice concentrate, the water, machlekes from machlekes the Sephardim and Ashkenazim, and I think we got a pretty clear explanation on the light. I don't know if anybody does anybody allow the use of light for kiddush? I mean, why do they make it if people aren't using it for kiddush? People aren't drinking grape juice. Who drinks grape juice these days? What's light used for? I mean, the way he explained
Kids drink it.
What?
Kids drink it.
I don't know, the way you understood this, Mordechai, help me out here. Is there, it seems to me that it's certainly less than rive, right? Or not? Did I misunderstand that?
Look, these are juice products for people who like juice.
Like juice.
People like different flavors of juice. So
I understand that. So juice products for people who like juice. Yeah, but I mean, kedem. I don't think they're making juice. I would be shocked if more than 2% of Kedem's grape juice was for people who are actually drinking juice, but maybe, you never know. But Lamaisa, Lafia Maskana, the light stuff doesn't seem to be usable. Is that correct? For Kiddush and Daled Kaisis. And the bracha is Shahakal, or the bracha is by Pregafen? What's the bottom line?
I wonder if it says on the label or not.
It shouldn't be so hard to come up with a label of Kedem Light, Kedem Grape Juice Light on the internet. Where's Pesach when we need him? Pesach. Kedem Light. What's it called? Light grape juice? That's the term? Kedem Light grape juice. Let's see if there's a picture. There you go. There is a picture. Numerous pictures at Amazon. Does the regular grape juices, do they have on the front, right on the cover, it says Kashal Daled Kaisis L'Kiddush, right? Right up front. Here
on the advertisement, it says Kedem Light Grape Juice beverage made from white grapes contains 65% juice.
6.5?
Yeah, that's what it says.
That's not what I heard.
And that's what the I put in Kedem Light Grape Juice label, and that's what it popped up.
Well, some of that 65% could be the reconstituted.
It could be, yeah.
That's what he said. That's what he said. How much percent is water? So anyway, I don't know what the bracha is at the end of the day after all this. Kedem grape juice ingredients.
the picture that I have shows on the back label that it's kosher l'kiddush shel HBrachos.
On the light.
contains 70% juice.
So we just gained 5% right here on this call. It went from 65 to 70. Okay. Grape juice from concentrate doesn't help us. We're looking about light grape juice. And then there's an article here from the Chicago CRC. Cohn, Rebelsky, Rupfelder. The grape juice not from concentrate. Okay, Rabbi Sai, the kashrus of this thing for Dal Kaisis and Kiddush is not our issue at the moment. Our issue is the bracha. So, let's see, using light grape juice Kiddush, OU, here we go. OU Torah. Previous we should add only a minimal amount of water to grape juice that will be used for Kiddush because it might change the taste. What about light grape juice that is already manufactured and contains about 33% water? Now we went from 65 to 70, and now we're down to 66.
I'm looking at the labels. It's 100% pure grape juice, no sugar, coloring, or flavor added. A healthy, enjoyable, and refreshing drink. Kosher for Passover for all year round. Kosher for all Jewish occasions. Kiddush, Havdalah, Bris, Bar Mitzvah, wedding, 4 cups at the Passover Seder.
So here's the answer that Rabbi, whoever gave it was, I forgot who gave this answer. So Rebelsky held one can use it for Kiddush. Regular grape juice loses much of its taste when diluted with water. Therefore, only a tiny amount, small amount of water may be added. Remember, we said that? Otherwise, will cause a substantial change in taste. However, light grape juice is not made from regular grapes. It is produced from specially select grapes that have a strong flavor, and the juice is a very intense taste. This juice can be watered down more effectively without losing its taste. Since many people actually prefer the taste of the less sugary light grape juice, it's considered an acceptable mezig, and therefore it is acceptable for Kiddush, right? That was Rabbi Belsky's heter. Now I remember the psak. So it was the paradox. The paradox was that they use a certain type of grapes, very powerful grapes, and that's why, which is why Rabbi Belsky held it was okay. Okay, and you have to know if everybody agrees with that. Let me see. I'm just checking here. Can this be used for Kiddush and Havdalah? In the back, he shows it's kosher. Kadam light is not good for Kiddush or Havdalah. This is a guy writing in, so this doesn't mean anything. I spoke in honor of Kadam, even their regular grapes, somewhat over the. Okay, this is a blog, so I'm not gonna continue with this because it has no validity to it. That's the bottom line. If you want to follow Rabbi Belsky's psak, you can. For some people who want to use it, then you want to use this because they have to, then they could, but obviously it's samech on one specific svara, which Rabbi Belsky was the paisik for the OU, so that's why OU says it's kosher for Kiddush and Dal Kaisis. So it's not a kasha that the kedem is at the OU, right? We know why. Okay, Rabbi Sai, little break here tonight. Thank you, Mordechai.